Why did a beautiful young woman choose a dangerous path of crime? And why did an ordinary boy become one of the most notorious bank robbers in American history? The answer will take us to the chaotic context of the 1930s. When the Great Depression ravaged America, a dramatic story of love and crime took place. Bonnie Parker, a beautiful young woman full of ambition, met Clyde Barrow, a reckless and instinctive boy. Together they created a legend of love, crime, and rebellion. From daring bank robberies to breathtaking police chases, Bonnie and Clyde lived a dramatic life. But behind the flashy adventures, there was a tragic love story and a heartbreaking ending. Wherever this couple goes, they bring disaster and death. From unknown people, the two meet and combine to become the most dangerous killers in America. Join us as we explore the turbulent lives of criminal couple Bonnie and Clyde. The female assassin was a petite, pretty girl who worked as a waitress and an unknown poet, while the other was a young man with a fast voice and a record of petty theft. The couple were Bonnie Parker and Clyde Chestnut Barrow. Bonnie Parker is petite, has blonde hair and a delicate face, and according to her acquaintances, is a very lovely girl. Living in Rowena, Texas, USA, Bonnie's parents are laborers, making a living in the poor neighborhoods of the city. As a good student at school, Bonnie Parker stands out in writing and drawing. Her favorite color is red, and she often uses this color to draw on her clothes, creating very unique and stylish outfits. Bonnie's father died early. Her mother had to take her 3 children to Cement City, near Dallas, to live with her grandparents. Bonnie got married at the age of 16 and faced many difficulties in life. To earn money, Bonnie had to work as a waitress and often endured harsh words from customers. Clyde Chestnut Barrow had brown hair and brown eyes. Despite his poor background, Clyde was very attractive to women. He came from poor farms in the fields of Tellico, Texas. His family was so large and poor that his father committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. Clyde soon learned the misery of the poor. Life seemed to offer nothing better than hard work and humiliation. From the spring of 1932 to the spring of 1934, the couple tried to escape from the theft charges they had committed in the past. They fled to another state in a stolen car in hopes of starting a new life. Clyde was a serial killer. He was not afraid to use a gun, and was even very good at it. Meanwhile, Bonnie, although she had never fired a shot, was also very bold with a gun. The two met in Texas in January 1930 as teenagers. Bonnie was 19 and Clyde was 21. A few days after meeting, Clyde was arrested by the police. However, thanks to her cunning, Bonnie helped Clyde escape from prison with a pistol. In 1932, Clyde continued his crimes by killing a police officer and a storekeeper. After this murder, the names of the killers were published in major states of the United States. The police began to hunt down the couple. From the stolen car, they gathered evidence and tracked the escape of the two criminals. In May 1933, wanted posters were posted in most states of the United States to search for Bonnie and Clyde. At that time, the evidence that the investigation agency had was fingerprints, some photos and records of the two people's criminal past. After a period of searching, the police discovered that Bonnie and Clyde were hiding in the state of New Orleans. They discovered that the couple had also received help from the Methvin family. At first, this family hid the crimes of the couple, but after a period of struggle, they decided to side with the police and help them capture Bonnie and Clyde. Knowing that the Methvin family had betrayed them, the two killers took them hostage. When the police arrived, the whole family had a gun to their necks with Clyde. Clyde threatened to kill them if the police made any move. Meanwhile, Bonnie asked the police to provide them with a getaway car. After getting the car, the two subjects dragged the father of the Methvin family into the car as a hostage. Thinking that they would escape safely, Bonnie and Clyde were surprised when the car they asked the police to give them was a booby-trapped car. It broke down after driving a short distance. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow Chestnut were both disgusted with the poverty in which they grew up. They were destined to meet. Some say they were made for each other. Clyde always used dissatisfaction with his circumstances as an excuse for his cold-blooded killings. In a journey that resembles the adventures of Robin Hood, Bonnie and Clyde planned to take over banks and large stores in 5 U.S. states. Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Louisiana, and New Mexico. The presence of a woman like Bonnie made Clyde's life more unique. Clyde was likened to the legendary bank robber John Dillinger. Throughout their criminal journey, Clyde and Bonnie always carried a Kodak camera. They both liked to capture interesting images alongside guns, intimate photos together. Later, when both died, the police found many films under the car seat. These films proved the deep and adventurous love of Clyde and Bonnie. They both mentally determined that they could die next week, next month, even tomorrow. Bonnie told her mother to take her home when she died, not to take her to a funeral home. Bonnie and Clyde fell in love at first sight. They forgot about their mutual friends and talked for hours. After that time, the two continued to be attracted to each other when they had the chance to meet. On February 12, 1930, Clyde confided in Bonnie about his past. Clyde confessed that he was being pursued by the police for previous crimes, especially during his time in Waco. Clyde says he has to leave town. Bonnie promises to wait for him, as long as Clyde doesn't leave forever. That same evening, Clyde was arrested. He was transferred to Waco for trial. Bonnie decided to move to Waco to visit Clyde. During a visit to Clyde in prison, Bonnie met Clyde's cellmate, Frank Turner. Frank Turner was also an ambitious man who tried to change his life but failed. Frank Turner said he wanted to escape from this prison and needed a gun. Frank gave Bonnie a handwritten map showing exactly where his parents lived in Waco and where Bonnie could find the gun he needed. Frank promised to help Clyde escape if Bonnie helped him with this. Bonnie did not hesitate to agree. Going to the address as instructed, Bonnie quickly found a .32 in the closet. The next day, Bonnie returned to visit the camp and found a way to deliver the gun to Frank. Days before Frank's trial for burglary and murder, he and Clyde made their move. They both escaped quickly due to the carelessness of the manager during the dinner. At home, Bonnie was ready to welcome Clyde, but Clyde did not appear. Her Romeo had run away alone. Clyde and Franks fled to Illinois and robbed toll booths and large stores along the way. They also stole cars to make their travels easier. They changed the license plates and used them freely. However, the two were caught up by the police and arrested. Clyde was taken back to Waco to await a new trial. With a series of new thefts occurring during his escape, Clyde was sentenced to an additional 14 years of hard labor at Eastham Prison in Huntsville, Texas. Eastham was considered hell. Clyde quickly changed because of the busy work here. On February 8, 1932, Clyde's parole from Eastham was unexpectedly signed. Clyde escaped from prison once again. Clyde returned to find Bonnie. Their love affair began again and was stronger than ever. Clyde assembles a new gang with former members of another disbanded gang, former inmates of Eastham Prison. Bonnie volunteered to join Clyde's gang. Their first robbery was in Kaufman, Texas. Bonnie enjoyed it and saw it as a romantic adventure with her lover. Once, when carrying out an important robbery with the gang, Clyde refused to let Bonnie join even though she had come to the location on her own. This made Bonnie feel extremely hurt. She wanted to do things that only men could do, as Clyde said. With a series of robberies and murders, Hamilton and Clyde became the most wanted criminals in the area. Clyde decided to leave Waco. Clyde went to Bonnie to inform her of his decision. Clyde said he wanted Bonnie to go with him to the Southwest to make a living, but he did not force Bonnie to do this. Immediately after hearing Clyde's plan, Bonnie did not hesitate. She smiled, hugged Clyde tightly, then wrote a letter back to her mother. Bonnie packed her luggage and left with Clyde that same day. Hamilton was an indispensable person in this journey of Clyde and Bonnie. The three headed to Springtown, Oklahoma in a stolen Ford after having consumed quite a bit of alcohol beforehand. The car was suddenly stopped by two police officers named Moore and Maxwell. As soon as the car stopped, without hesitation, Clyde and Hamilton pulled out their guns and shot straight at the two police officers. The distance was too close for the two police officers to react. Moore died on the spot. Maxwell was seriously injured in the abdomen. Before collapsing, Maxwell managed to notify his colleagues. The Ford drove away smoothly as if nothing had happened. Bonnie suggested going to her aunt, Nettie Stamps, near Springtown to escape. Bonnie had been there a few years ago. Nettie lived alone on a farm near Carlsbad, New Mexico. The three were unaware that the car was being followed. Joe Johns, an experienced local police officer, noticed the car had several suspicious signs. When he checked the license plate, he discovered that the car had been reported missing by its owner the day before. Joe spent an afternoon tracking the suspicious vehicle as it parked outside Nettie's farm. Clyde was equally alert when he discovered that the police were following him. He welcomed Joe to the farm with a .38 caliber gun. Hearing the gunshot, Nettie was frightened and immediately called the local police. Clyde and Bonnie hurriedly left the farm. Clyde Barrow understood that if he was caught this time, he would definitely die in the electric chair. He felt a little remorseful for his crimes. His unstable mentality made Clyde even more reckless. He was ready to shoot anyone who looked at him strangely. After many small robberies on the run, Clyde and Bonnie decide to attack the Oswego Bank. On November 30th, 1932, Bonnie, posing as a teller, approached the bank to check on the security and arrangements there. As soon as Bonnie returned to her car and reported the situation, Clyde entered with a .38 caliber gun, approached a teller, and began to restrain her. Clyde had only received $80 from the teller when the bank's security system detected him. He rushed to his car and luckily escaped. Failing in their first bank robbery, Clyde and Bonnie gained a lot of experience. Both were more successful in their following robberies. Clyde and Bonnie returned to Texas to celebrate Christmas with their family. During this time, Clyde thought about recruiting more members to re-establish the gang. Clyde had known the Jones family since he was a child and had taken a special interest in their son, William Daniel. William was a few years younger than Clyde. Clyde asked William to join his gang when William was only 16 years old. William was a good driver and could use his fists to get things done if needed. When Clyde and Bonnie left Dallas on Christmas Eve, their gang had gained a few new members. Christmas 1932, soon after Willia joined the gang, Clyde planned his gang's heist. Clyde thought they needed a better car to get around in. Their target was the Ford Coupe V8 parked outside the mansion at 606 13th Street. William was a bit of a mess when he first started working with the gang. When he and Clyde got to the car, he couldn't get it to start. William was unaware that as he was trying to start the car, John Doyle, the owner of the car, saw him from the window of his room and ran to the car with a gun. Clyde, who was sitting in the other car watching, quickly pulled out his gun to signal William and aimed it straight at John Doyle to shoot. A bullet hit John in the chest, causing him to collapse on the spot. Clyde sped away from Route 13. Bonnie was in the back seat with William, who was constantly lamenting the failure of the first mission right after the gang was reformed. Clyde's gang had a base in Dallas. After each job, the gang would return to this place to meet. After the 13th Street murder, the police paid special attention to this gang. In March 1933, Clyde's brother, Ivy Buck Barrow, was released from prison after a long time. Buck traveled to Dallas with his beautiful wife to find Clyde and join the gang. While serving his sentence in Huntsville, Buck escaped by climbing over a wall and making his way back to Texas. During his escape, Buck met and married Blanche, a beautiful redhead. It was Blanche who advised Buck to turn himself in. Soon after his release, Buck heard about his brother Clyde's gang and wanted to join. Buck convinced Blanche to come to Dallas under the pretext of visiting his brother. With Buck's help, Clyde's gang begins robbing banks in the area. The police are determined to catch the gang. On the morning of April 13th, Joplin police and investigators surrounded the house believed to be the headquarters of Clyde's gang. At that time, key members of the gang were present at the house. Clyde was reading the newspaper but quickly noticed the presence of the police. Everyone else was calm enough to prepare for action, but Blanche became confused and began to panic. She screamed in fear and ran back and forth in the house. All of them secretly left the house after some clashes with the police, some of whom were injured. They chose a hotel near Amarillo to hide and treat their wounds. They constantly changed the license plate of the stolen car to avoid police tracking. Wanted posters were posted everywhere, making it very difficult for the gang to move and operate. One day, Clyde was driving on Highway 203, heading towards Wellington. He didn't know that a small bridge over the road was no longer in use and was undergoing maintenance. No one in the gang paid attention to the warning sign. Clyde couldn't react in time. He slammed on the brakes. The car screeched and crashed into a ravine. Bonnie's side window was blown open, and Bonnie was thrown out before the hood caught fire. Luckily, no one in the gang was killed. Bonnie was badly burned. She screamed in pain. Tom Pritchard, a farmer who lived nearby, was present at the scene of the accident. Booney's face was also badly injured, but Tom still easily recognized Bonnie as the wanted man. Members of Clyde's gang came to Tom and his wife's house after the accident. With little money left, Bonnie's health was deteriorating and she needed to be hospitalized. Clyde's gang was gradually destroyed by the police. Buck died, Blanche was blinded, and Bonnie was constantly injured. Clyde, unwilling to continue this situation any longer, drove for hours to Platte City. Hello, everyone. We continue to come to the breathtaking developments in the criminal journey of the couple Bonnie and Clyde. William Daniel Jones, a close associate of the Notorious couple, was arrested in Houston and brought back to Dallas for questioning. Two experienced police officers, Hilton and Alcorn, took over the case and directly questioned William. Sheriff Richard Schmid asked Hinton to stop all the cases he was investigating to focus on this one. "We must catch Bonnie and Clyde quickly," William cried during his interrogation. He always maintained his innocence and that his complicity with Clyde in the car theft and murder of John Doyle was forced. Currently, he has no contact or information about Clyde and Bonnie. Hinton does not believe William's testimony. Hinton and Alcorn had information from the farmer who had saved the Clyde gang from the cliff crash. The two of them went there themselves to look for clues. Many people reported seeing a group of men with guns in the rural area. However, the clues stopped there. The group had left long before Hinton and Alcorn arrived. While investigating Clyde and Bonnie's files, Hinton discovered that Clyde Cummings, Clyde's mother's, birthday was coming up. Clyde loved his mother very much, and according to family sources, he was always present on her birthday. With only one day left until the 21st, Hinton had a feeling something special was going to happen. A police team was deployed near the house where Clyde Cummings was staying that day, but nothing unusual happened. The next day, Hinton receives a phone call saying Clyde's family is going on a picnic and that Clyde might show up. As expected, suddenly a gray sedan appeared at the picnic site. Clyde and Bonnie appeared. The police suddenly appeared. Clyde quickly pulled out his gun to defend himself. Hinton fired 2 warning shots at Clyde's legs, but failed to stop him from running away. Clyde and Bonnie ran to the car and disappeared from everyone's sight. Hinton's plan failed this time. On May 6, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde returned to Dallas to visit their family. This was the last time they did so. On May 23rd, a manhunt for the couple was launched. On the morning of May 23, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde drove a stolen Ford the 5th from Topeka, Kansas, Texas to Ma Canfield's Cafe in downtown Gippsland, Louisiana. They then headed down Sales Road. At the time, they were 2 escaped assassins who planned to commit another robbery to raise money. While on the road, Clyde saw Ivy Methvin, Henry Methvin's father, standing next to the truck, which appeared to have been turned off. But when Clyde got out of the car to help, Ivy immediately ran away, hiding under a tree. After this moment, 167 bullets were fired like rain, killing Clyde instantly. The first 2 shots were in Clyde's head. The next 27 were shot into the killer's body. 8 bullets were stuck in his leg. Meanwhile, Bonnie's face on the left side was hit by 2 bullets. Another bullet hit 2 fingers on her right hand. The police kept shooting until Bonnie and Clyde stopped moving. Finally, Clyde's body was found hanging from the steering wheel and Bonnie's body was thrown into a nearby door. Hinton never forgot the image of Bonnie as he approached the car after they were both downed. As soon as the car door opened, a beautiful little girl was shot out of the car door. I could smell her light perfume mixed with the smell of gunpowder. After all, fame finally came to Bonnie and Clyde, although it was not the way they had wished for since childhood. During their time on the run, Bonnie and Clyde constantly appeared in the media, but in the wanted columns or stories about the crimes they had committed. Newspapers, television, Everywhere the faces of this killer couple appeared. Even many years after their deaths, Bonnie and Clyde were constantly mentioned. Their names became the subject of a series of articles and analyses. The story of Bonnie and Clyde was even made into a crime film called Bonnie and Clyde, produced in 1967. Both funerals were huge. More than 20,000 people attended Bonnie's funeral, and her family had a hard time getting to her gravesite. Meanwhile, Clyde's funeral had thousands of people gathering outside the funeral home in Dallas hoping to see his body. Bonnie and Clyde's belongings were kept and put on display. In 2005, the Bonnie and Clyde Recovery Museum opened at the Canfield Cafe on Gippsland Main Street, which includes the car they were in the day they were shot and the shirt Clyde was wearing that day. 75 years after the deaths of Bonnie and Clyde, new evidence has revealed that Bonnie Parker was not the vicious woman history has painted her to be. About half a century after actress Faye Dunaway famously portrayed the villainous Bonnie Parker, a new investigation has uncovered that while her husband Clyde Barrow reveled in his heinous crimes, his wife Bonnie Parker often fought with him to stop the bloodshed. Dr. Beatrice Collin, author of the TV series The True Story of Bonnie Parker, told BBC Radio 4, "In many ways Bonnie Parker was innocent. Bonnie often suggested that her husband kidnap his victims rather than kill them, and she often drove them hundreds of miles before pushing them out of the car and abandoning them on the road. Despite the fact that Bonnie was with a violent, brutal man, she was naive, and you have to remember that she was very young. Unfortunately, Bonnie Parker's name was forever tarnished when, on Easter Sunday, 1934, Clyde Barrow fired at two highway patrolmen who attempted to stop the couple's car on Route 114 in Texas. Bonnie was asleep in the back seat at the time of the crime, and according to records, she went down to the road to help the victims. But an anonymous witness insisted that Bonnie and her husband were both responsible for their actions. And it was too late. The cold-blooded murderer had shocked the nation, and the police's humiliation had inadvertently helped to create the legend of the notorious murderous couple Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. It was certainly true that Bonnie Parker had joined a gang of robbers, whose accomplices had committed many murders of police and civilians, but Bonnie had never fired a shot. But the media, in order to attract readers, arbitrarily created an unrealistic image of a cigar-smoking, skilled female robber. Bonnie was disfigured in the 1967 film starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. The Radio for Film began to dispel the myth and reconstruct the image of a woman who had fallen into the arms of a misguided man. "They were Romeo and Juliet with guns," says Dr. Beatrice Collin, and the violent accounts that followed assumed the cold-blooded nature of Bonnie's actions. But people also saw the real her, looking at dying men and holding them in her gentle arms. But there remains an equally troubling question. How naive was Bonnie Parker? After all, she is still considered an accomplice. Dr. Beatrice Collin analyzed, Bonnie was really intelligent and had the ability to write poetry. And when she was still in school, she won many poetry awards. But because she came from a poor family background, poverty followed Bonnie all her life and she could not escape it. Then, Bonnie met Clyde Barrow, at least in the opinion of a poor woman like Bonnie. She was fascinated by the young man's beautiful way of dressing, as well as his ability to drive many different types of cars. But the appearance did not say anything about Clyde's kindness, because he was a murderer. In contrast to Bonnie's innocent, poor and pure lifestyle, her lover soon fell into the world of crime. At the age of 21, Clyde spent his teenage years with various robberies and car thefts. Shortly after the pair met, Clyde was sentenced to a year in prison, and after his release, he became a hardened criminal. Life was inevitable for Bonnie, as the 19-year-old girl full of dreams of adventure was drawn into Clyde's life of crime without even realizing it. Although Bonnie was actually married when she was with Clyde, that was not a big obstacle. It is known that at the age of 15, Bonnie married Roy Thornton, a man who was also not very good, or exactly like Clyde, but to a lesser extent, a gangster. Bonnie and her husband often did not see each other for months. To fill the void, Bonnie had sex with Clyde. Coming from the same poor background, the two quickly became attached to each other. Both dreamed of eating well, dressing well, living well, and driving cars. The flashy images on the screen were in complete contrast when the police discovered the couple's shabby hideouts. Notably, the photo of Bonnie Parker puffing on a cigar became famous. The couple was also famous for their frequent photo shoots. Bonnie was also considered a dangerous woman because she had never divorced her ex-husband but was still openly having an affair with another man. Bonnie was not only a glamorous face on fashion magazines but also the main character on the cover of crime magazines. It can be affirmed that Bonnie is the person who is favored to appear on magazine covers more than any superstar in today's era. The 1967 film did not accurately portray Bonnie's real life. For example, Bonnie was the victim of a car accident in 1934 and had a leg severely burned. Before the tragedy, many people claimed that Bonnie was a very beautiful woman. But at the end of her life, the burns on her body left many haunting memories for Bonnie. After planning to track Bonnie and Clyde for 4 months, former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer and 5 other officers finally spotted the duo in Louisiana on May 23, 1934. The officers surrounded Bonnie and Clyde's Ford the 5th 8 on a country road and fired a total of 187 bullets into the car. It was a terrible ambush. The police wanted the duo to surrender, not to kill them. I think Bonnie was not killed because she had never shot or killed anyone. But fate had decided for Bonnie since the day she hooked up with the murderer Clyde. Maybe Bonnie abandoned Clyde when she saw his evil deeds, but maybe because she loved him too much that she pushed her life into darkness. You can call Bonnie a stupid woman, but I think she was quite brave because she knew what would happen to her at the last minute, said Dr. Colin.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And as always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next one.